Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So this past weekend, over a 2-day period, most of Friday and some of Saturday, I did a 2-day holiday craft boutique shopping event, basically, like one of those Christmas shopping pop-ups. And I wanted to share with you how that went, tell you a little bit about it, how I do things at those shows, maybe offer a little bit of tips and insight that could help you out as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first of all, as you probably saw in either the title or the thumbnail, in this 2-day event, I brought in about $7,000. All in candles. Well, mostly in candles. I have a few other miscellaneous things as well that I sell at checkout, but it's 99% candles. Now, I've done events that do less than this, and I've done events that do more than this. So I'm going to cover several different things in this video, and I'm going to start with the prep, the show prep, how I get ready for an event like this. Well, this was an extra tricky year for me. If you've been on this channel for a while, then you're already well aware of this. But if you're brand new to this channel, which, by the way, my name's Wade with Black Tie Barn, so thanks for stopping by. But if you are brand new, you might not know that I just got a new storefront and a warehouse down the street as well, where I'm going to do all the making and fulfillment and things like that. So I just got that like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I haven't even really moved into them yet. So this is a very, very tough timing for me, trying to get moved into those while also trying to get ready for this show. And my website's still down because I'm trying to do all of this at the same time, and I've had to try to prioritize as well as trying to run this channel. So it's been a very, very chaotic year for me, but even more so right now. In fact, I almost didn't do the show this year. I had told them no, it's an invite-only show, so they are the ones that pick and choose the vendors. And I think this was year 5 or 6 for me. And I'm glad that they were persistent, but they continued to ask over several weeks, just asking if I could find a way to do it. And so I caved and I made it happen. And I'm glad I did. But the reason I was hesitant was because of all of this going on. I was super stressed and worried about trying to even see if it was possible to do it, because there was just, I didn't have time to get all my inventory and check supplies. I didn't even know what I had to make. I was working on several new products. I have stuff in 4 different places. Like, I was just really worried about it. But long story short, obviously I made it work, and I'm glad I did. So what I had to do for this show was different than other shows. So normally I just plan out what I'm going to take to the show, and then I make that product leading up to the show with as much advance notice as I can, but sometimes you're still working right up to the show. And then you've got to, of course, plan your setup and any promotions you're going to run. You got to plan your checkout system and then load everything up. I was on extra crunch time this year, so I did a lot more making leading right up to the show. I mean, working pretty much all day, every day that I was awake, making more products for the show, then labeling them, and then doing an inventory before the show. Then I loaded up the truck and the trailer with all my other materials like shelving and everything that I take. And that's pretty much what it is for as far as show prep. Show prep is probably the most important part, in my opinion, of an event, which is why I was stressed about this one, because I didn't get a lot of time to focus on prep. So after I loaded everything up, as I mentioned, this was a 2-day event. So Friday, the show was in the afternoon and evening, like 6 or 7 hours. And then Saturday, it was earlier in the day, but again, another 6 or 7 hours. And the setup itself takes just a couple hours, really. I mean, taking everything into the booth is the worst part. Candles are heavy. I take a lot of product, and a lot of the product is very, very heavy. So it is a challenge getting all the product in. Now, luckily at this event, they have volunteers helping other vendors bring things in, and that's a huge, huge help. I also had help this year from Tara, who you'll see in some of this footage, I think. She's awesome. She helped me set up that day while I was bringing everything in. She was basically helping with the merchandising, like setting up some of the displays and things, and helping me make sure like we had enough of something, and letting me know of things I might need more of before the show starts, that kind of thing. So she was there for a couple hours on Thursday. And then she was also there for the show on Friday and Saturday as well. As far as the physical setup of the booth, there are several ways to do this. A lot of people kind of start with just a standard table, and then you sit behind the table. You've got your products on the table, and then you're back behind it to kind of like help or talk to customers, and then, and then check out. It's going to depend on what space you're working with. Like if you're at an event where all you get's the one table, like that's all you have, you don't really have a choice. You just have to kind of sit behind it. At a larger event where you have a little bit more space, this is not the method that I like to use. And I've mentioned this in past videos talking about doing craft shows. I much prefer having a U shape where the customers have more room to enter into your space and shop around. And you'll see it in my display. But I like to have basically walls of products lining and then along the back so they can walk in and shop almost like they're in a little store. And then my checkout is kind of off to the side. So I'll pick one edge of that U to try to stay out of their way. And it also helps with the flow of traffic. So I've seen people with the checkout in the middle, and the problem with that is you've got people who are checking out standing in the middle while other people are trying to cross past to shop. That's not the best option in my opinion. So I like to stay off to the side, let them do their shopping, and then checkouts on the very last corner. So that is how I do my setup. Now, the only exception this year, because I had more products, is instead of just doing the U-shape, I also had a couple kind of floating shelves out in the middle. One shelf kind of in the corner, opposite of checkout, and then there was one kind of on the outside of the U, right in the middle. And that was just some highlighted collections I wanted to focus some attention on, and there are also a lot of new products, so I want to see how they would do. I also brought a little extra decor this year than I normally do. I like to keep things fairly simple, but at the same time, this is a seasonal show, so you really want to highlight the season, you know, the fall and holiday and Christmas season. And so more colors, more aesthetics, more things to grab their eyes, grab their attention when they're coming into the space, because there's a lot of vendors everywhere. Our booth does such a great job every year because it stands out. You'll see so much color everywhere. When you glance over to one side and you see all that color where everything else, you know, a lot of vendor booths kind of look sort of similar, right? Like there's tables and there's backdrops and there's just kind of products and but when you see like a booth that's full of color like ours is, and then I've got this banner that stands up behind too and it's full of color, and everything's got this sharp contrast, you can't help but notice it. So when you come up to that floor, when you come up to that space, you just can't help but notice our booth, which is awesome. So let's talk about inventory. Because the question I get a lot is how much inventory, how many products should you bring? That is so hard to answer, and I can't answer that for you because it entirely depends on your business, your brand, like what you're selling, but also the type of event you're doing. If it's a small event, then you really don't need to bring that much. If it's a large event, you probably can't bring enough. And if you're an event like this, which is kind of somewhere in the middle, it's really hard to know. In fact, I've been wrong every single year. And it's a funny story, and it's a good wrong, but basically every year, again, as I mentioned, the show is a Friday and Saturday night. Every single year, I end up going home Friday night and making more product because I always run out of like a couple different collections. Even if I bring more the next year, I run out again still, and then have to go back and make more product. So I'm always up all night Friday night after the show, the first day of the show, making more product to take in Saturday morning. It's crazy. And the same thing happened this year, probably even worse. Some of my newer products just went crazy. I used this green vessel. It was a 2-wick vessel. That one I couldn't keep in stock. It was gone in the first 2 hours of day one, and I brought a lot of it. And then I have these winter white wood wicks from my winter collection. Those just don't stay on the shelf. And so we kept running through all those. And again, I brought plenty. I brought like 50% more than I brought the last year and still ran out Friday night. Went home, restocked, made a bunch more, brought it all in Saturday, restocked the shelves, ran out again of almost everything. So it's a great problem, but it's also difficult because like you don't want to overstock, you don't want to bring too much, right? And so it's kind of, especially if you're dealing with like inventory and supply chain issues, you don't want to be making products that you don't need to make. So it can be a tough little balance, but ultimately it's a good problem to have. And worst case scenario, you run out of a product. I mean, that's great. You sold out. Now, of course, it's better to have more to sell because that's just more sales, it's more revenue. But you just got to do your best. And every year you do this, you get a little bit better at knowing what sells and what doesn't sell. And so I just tend to never have enough of some things, and I'm starting to figure out which things I don't need to bring as much of. For example, this year I made those new holiday 2-wick vessels. Really nice looking. Those did well. I definitely need to bring more of those going forward. On the contrast, my standard kind of smaller jars, my 7-ounce candles, those didn't do near as well as they normally do, just because at this event, everyone's looking for those larger, more upscale and seasonal things. So while I still sold some of the standard collection, I didn't sell near as many as I normally do because I brought this new stuff. And so going forward, I'll bring less of the standard collection and more of the new collection. Those are the kind of things you learn every year by doing these shows. And it's great to have a system to look back on to figure out what did well or better than others, so you can plan for the next event. Now, your checkout system, whatever you're using to handle your sales process, will usually provide some of that information for you. I also use CraftyBase, which is again the sponsor of today's video, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I can look back in that system too and see what's sold best during certain times of year, and that helps me make sure I'm making the right product at the right time. All right, so we've talked about show prep, booth setup, and inventory. Let's talk about the actual sales and checkout process during the show. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, I had Tara helping me at the show, and she was the one that spent most of the time out on the floor. Now, every year I do this a little bit differently. Sometimes I'm out on the floor more, and then someone else is helping check out. Sometimes we kind of go back and forth just to mix it up and give each other a break. In this particular event, Tara was out there pretty much the entire time. She loves to do that. She's extremely good at it, extremely social, relates really well to pretty much all customers. She's very good at marketing, selling. She helps the customers. So like while they're picking out products, she'll grab them for them and set them aside for them so they don't have to carry it around. She just knows what to say, and she's very, very good at it. So she loves doing that part. She loves being out on the floor. I let her do that as much as she wanted while I kind of was doing more of the checkout, talking to the customers as they were checking out, bagging up their orders, telling them about the website, which ironically is still down at the moment, but letting them know that it'd be back up shortly, letting them know about the new storefront that's coming soon, things like that. And then basically just thanking them for being a customer and supporting a small business. So what I used for the checkout system is a square stand. And this is the only thing I use the square stand for. So on website, I use Shopify, and in my store, I haven't decided 100% what I'm going to use yet. I'm either going to use the Shopify POS, so it's integrated with the store, or I'm going to use something like Clover. But this Square app I've used for so long, and with that stand, it's so easy and simple, and it just works every single time. I've had it for like 10 years now, I think. Maybe not quite that long. And so it just stays in my like live craft show booth kit, the box that I make, and it just goes with me every one of these shows. I make sure to test it the night before the show, make sure there's no problems. But other than that, it just works great. And so I continue to use it. Now, Square can do inventory and all this other stuff. I don't use any of the other features of Square, just to check out products. That's really all I do with it. And I've got a few bonus tips here at the end of the video that I'm going to tell you about. And one of them involves what I do with the Square setup. So I'll get to that here shortly. In an event like this, sometimes people really care about the aesthetics and other people just want their stuff and go. They got a lot of booths to hit and they don't want to be there forever. So the faster you can make the checkout and the sales process for them, the better. In fact, some of the feedback that I got after the show was all about how friendly and quick the process was. And they also really appreciate the fact that this is a small business that's local, but also makes all the products themselves. So I should have probably said this earlier, but the other thing I like to remind people, and Tara was reminding people out on the floor, was letting them know, are you familiar with the brand? We're based out in Liberty or Kansas City, Missouri. We make everything ourselves. That kind of stuff customers absolutely love to hear and they love to support. So that's something I forgot to mention earlier, but I would definitely be highlighting as much as you can. And then I also take a candle care, kind of like a 3x5 candle care or info or promotional card, and I include that in every single order as well. I'll just put that in their bag. That way, if they want to follow up with you later, either to leave a review or to shop on your website or just a reminder to come back next year. Kind of feel like I'm backtracking a little bit here, but I want to talk a little bit more about merchandising or the display. So if being in retail and this kind of business is a little new to you, the term merchandising basically is how to market, sell, and display your products for the best opportunity to be sold. As I mentioned, Tara is really, really good at this. Me being in this business long enough, I've started to learn really well what works for me versus what doesn't work as well. So between the two of us, we're usually pretty good at merchandising. So when we were doing the merchandising and setting up our displays, we were focused on highlighting new items and best sellers. Those are what we want to focus everyone's attention on first, because you want to test the new items, see how people react to them, because it's valuable information going forward. But then of course you want your best sellers out there as well, because if people are buying your best sellers and those are also really good products, then people are going to want to buy more stuff and they keep coming back. So I think it goes without saying your best sellers you want front and forward facing. And then the key with merchandising is being willing to adapt and change things. So what you might think is the best setup, you've got to be willing to change it. If you see it's getting no eyes, no views, no traction after a few hours, change it, move it around, take it down and move something else up and see if you get better results. And then if we ran out of stuff, so if we ran out of best sellers, then we would take something else up and move it back up. And so there is definitely strategies to merchandising and display. The longer you do this, the more experience you'll get doing it as well. Part of merchandising was bringing some of these other decor items too. So we built a few scent trays, which is basically like little metal trays or platters that have some type of materials that represent the scent. And you'll see this in a few images, but you know, a very easy example would be if you've got a cinnamon type candle, you'll have some cinnamon sticks out, right? That's a very obvious one. We had a Cotton Creek candle that has some cotton on it, or orchid candle that has some orchids with it. For the tobacco candle, we had some tobacco and some sugar crystals and a pipe. For the distillery candle, we had a whiskey bottle. For saddle shop, we had some leather. You can do this with pretty much every fragrance. So we took some of the best sellers and some of the newer collections and went all out with those decor to try to promote those a little bit more. And it really, really does help. And melts. I'm sorry, I've been ignoring wax melts the entire time, but we also sell those here. And I do have this kind of spinning hook display for wax melts, and then we have them sprinkled in throughout the rest of the displays with their candles as well. And so yeah, I sell tons of melts. Actually, my margins on wax melts are the best, but the gross profit on them is obviously by far the lowest. But anyways, yeah, so I did sell wax melts as well, so I apologize if I didn't mention that earlier. As impulse buys at the very end, we also sell these rechargeable USB lighters. So I showed some of these on the channel probably like a year ago, and then I worked with someone to do some custom branding on them. So they do have my logo on them, and then I would have each color displayed at checkout, and a lot of people were interested in those as well. But again, it's a small percentage of the total sales. The last thing I'll mention about merchandising was as far as the color scheme go. I talked about earlier how the color was drawing so much attention and colors were just flying off the shelf. Green, red, and white was just, I couldn't keep it in stock. That stuff was just going constantly. Obviously, the time of year, that's pretty anticipated, but it is still really interesting that just certain colors of vessels, even if I put a different scent in them, just fly off the shelf. Now, obviously, certain scents are, of course, going to be more popular than others. That's why you have bestsellers, for example, 100%. But the color of the vessel and the color of the wax makes a huge, huge difference for me. I know a lot of candle makers sell, you know, standard candles, non-dyed, totally fine. I've got collections of candles that don't have any dye either, and they're just kind of plain and modern looking. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But in my experience over time doing this for 10 plus years, any candle that is either colored dye, like colored wax, see-through jars that are colored wax, or colored vessels, just blow everything else out of the water. I mean, it's not even close. Like, it used to be a 7-to-1 ratio for me for over like a 5-year period of colored candles versus non-colored candles. Now it's like 12-to-1. It's not even close. All right, you might be wondering if I ran any show specials or show promotions, which I would highly recommend you do. It's something that creates some sense of urgency for your customers. They know that if you want this product, this is the time to get it because you're getting a special sale or promotion for getting it at the show. So the promotion that I've done at this event pretty much every year, and it works really well, is buy 3, the 4th is free. And there's no limit on that. So every 3 items they buy, they get another item for free. And they can mix and match any items. They can buy like 2 wood wick candles and a standard candle and a 2-wick candle, or they can buy 2 wax melts and 2 standard candles. Whatever it is, the 4th item is free. Now, generally speaking, as you might assume, it's going to be the cheapest of the items that is the free one, but customers know that and they expect that, so they usually kind of plan accordingly as well. And then of course the other thing I offer is some vendor discounts to other booths. You got to be a little careful if you're already offering a promotion like buy 3, get 1 free, which is essentially like giving away 4 candles for the price of 3, probably goes without saying. You got to make sure that you don't offer anything else in addition that's going to just crush your margins. You don't want to be giving products away. You want to incentivize customers, but they also know that you're running a business. And if they like your products enough, they want you to stay around, which means you've got a profit. So be kind of careful on that. So, but again, that's totally up to you. But it is good to build good relationships with your vendors, which I have great ones at this show. So I'm more than happy to do that. Well, if you get a chance at any slow time, walk around, check out the other booths, talk to other vendors, let them know who you are and what you have. A lot of times you can find some collaborations you can do, sell each other's products, work with each other. Definitely support other vendors and let them know who you are and build those relationships. So before we get to those last 3, you're probably curious a little bit more about the sales and the revenue aspect. As I started off the video, I mentioned I brought in about $7,000 in sales. And then of course there are my cost of goods that have to come out of that. Whether or not there's a booth fee or a sales commission, all events are different. Some of them have a flat booth fee. It could be $100, $500. I've done shows where it's like a $3,000 booth fee to have a corner spot at a crazy large holiday show. And then there's other shows that don't do a booth fee. They just take a small commission instead. So the better you do, the better they do. But if you don't do very well, you're not out much. There's not much risk. So all events are different. But of course, there are some of those fees. There are some kind of credit card, or in this case, Square transaction fees, which don't really amount to too much. So that's not bad. I also purchased lunch for myself and anyone else that's working. So in this case, Tara. What else? If you're renting any kind of trailer or U-Haul or something like that, you might have a cost for that. And then I paid Tara around $500 to help for those 2 days. I think that really covers it. These shows are a lot of work. As long as it works for you and you can justify it, then I would highly recommend doing it. Not just from the sales and the revenue side, but from the experience side. You learn to interface with customers, you learn how to handle sales better, you learn to talk with other vendors. It's just amazing the experience you get by doing these type of live shows. All right, so let's do these last 3 bonus tips. The first is how I do pre and post inventory. And this isn't something I've always done, but I've been doing it the last few years. And let me tell you, for me, it is so much better. And this is where I'm gonna also talk a little bit more about Crafty Base, because it's what I use to at the end of this process. In the past, I used to put all of my items into my sales system. I'd have all my items listed, and when people brought those items up, I'd find it, and I'd add that to their cart and check it all out. And then all of those items would, at the end of the day, I had an exact quantity of every single item I sold. It sounds great in theory, right? Because like everything, everything is correct. And the best part about that is if you're using Crafty Base, it can import all of those in for you. You don't have to do anything other than just verify everything is correct once the show is over. So again, this sounds great. However, it to me is not the best option. And there's a couple reasons why. As I talked about earlier, I am focused on the customer experience, and I want it to be fast and quick and efficient for them. If they bring 9 candles up and I'm hunting around for that specific jar and scent and everything in my checkout system, that is slow. It used to take so much longer to do checkout. I also don't like the lack of flexibility a system like that gives you, because at a show like this, you're often making little adjustments as needed. Maybe someone wants to swap a scent or something like that. There's so many reasons why you might need to do something that's not just normal structured. And with a system that has no flexibility like that, you're kind of locked in. So instead, here's what I've done the last couple of years. I just create basically 5 buttons on my checkout system. My 7-ounce candle, my 13.5-ounce 2-wick candle, my 10-ounce wood-wick candle, my wax melts, and my lighter. So 5 buttons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No matter what scent they choose, I just hit that button. So if they buy like 4 wood wicks, 3 2-wicks, and a couple single wicks, I just boom, 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 boom. It's very simple, easy peasy. And because I do that free, buy 3, get 4th one free, I just put a same button underneath each one of those, and they're color coordinated, that is just the free option for that. So it's the exact same item, except for instead of being $12, for example, it's free. Or instead of being $22, it's free. So it's just 2 rows, the 5 products, and then the 5 free products. It is so much faster. No matter what people bring up to checkout, I can have them done in like 10 seconds. I just hit those buttons enough times and I'm done. I do not care at all at the time what scent they are choosing. So how does that work? Well, I think you see the initial benefit. It's much faster, right? And it's much easier. The other major benefit is before the show, I do pre-inventory. So I just take an inventory of everything I'm taking to the show. And if I take anything else the next day because I had to restock, like I do every year, then I add that to that inventory. At the end of the show, I take the inventory again. The difference is what I sold in each of those scents. That's it. Like, it's that easy. You're gonna have to do inventory anyways, so I use that process to tell me exactly what I sold rather than having the itemized buttons for every single thing that I have in the checkout system. Hopefully that makes sense. So how do I use Crafty Base to help me with this? So I take the difference in pre-show and post-show inventory, I go into Crafty Base, and instead of having to import every single order and me having to go through 180 orders, I create one order, one batch order with all the things that I sold based off that inventory check that I did. So if I find out that I sold 27 of this and 19 of this and 14 of this, then I just do all of that in one order. And I call the entire order 2022 Holiday Show or whatever it's called. And one sales receipt, one order has everything on it. It's so much easier, it's so much better, and it makes it so much easier for you to go back every year and look at how that show did in each year in the past and going forward without having to go through a bunch of like imported orders and then group them all together and categorize them into a show. It's just so much easier to do it this way, I promise you. That is how I use Crafty Base to help my live shows. It is invaluable. And because Crafty Base is tracking my recipes, and every time I make an item, it knows exactly how much it costs me to make that item. And then when I sell it, it knows what my margin is, right? So at the end of the show, I can see the cost of goods sold for the show. So here is my gross profit. Here is my net profit after the cost of goods came out. And then there's other operating expenses like, someone helping at the booth and other fees or whatever, right? But Crafty Base shows me very, very quickly what my net profit is after the cost for me to make the products. It's awesome. If you're unfamiliar with Crafty Base, I know I've talked about it on this channel a lot, but if it is new to you, check out the link in the description below. I've got other videos that talk about Crafty Base and show more of an overview of how it works. If you're interested, I've been using it for like 8 years now, so highly recommend it. Second bonus tip, I guess I did mention it earlier, was be willing to be flexible with your merchandising. So willing to change up and mix up your displays as you go, as the show goes on. Try to restock things as you can and then shuffle things around. If something isn't working, move it to a new space. We had one product that hadn't sold anything. We moved it one shelf over and all of a sudden we were selling it like hotcakes. Kind of crazy. At events like this, merchandising is like 9/10 of the battle. You have your initial setup, you've got your products made, you've got your checkout system. We have all these little things that we worry about as business owners, right? All these little things, and they matter. But it's kind of funny to think that like 90% of it boils down to your merchandising and the ability to sell. Last but not least, it's be willing to try to lead your customers in the right direction. So I do this a lot, and Tara was doing the same thing this weekend. If you see a customer kind of shopping around, don't be afraid to ask them if they're drawn to something. Like, are they looking for something in particular? A lot of people have a certain kind of palette for fragrances that they like. It could be outdoorsy and woodsy, it can be fruity, it can be bakery scents, whatever the case may be, customers usually have a preference. And if they're shopping for someone, they usually know the preference of that person they're shopping for as well. So don't be afraid to ask them and then try to lead them in the right direction, because ultimately you're going to lead to a better customer experience because they're going to be more satisfied with the result, with the product that they get. So you don't want to be overbearing. You don't want to be pushy at all. I'm like very much against that, but be willing to have a conversation with them, a very short one, and just say, hey, is there anything I can help you find? Are you drawn to any particular sense? Over here, we've got our kind of food and bakery type scents. And over here, we've got our more woodsy and pine and outdoor fragrances. Or if you're looking for something for your husband, we've got our masculine scents here on this shelf and our hideaway collection. There's just a lot of things you can do to help lead your customers in the right direction. So I hope you all enjoyed a little bit of the behind the scenes of this craft show and the things that I'm thinking about when I'm setting up for them. And then of course what I do after the show as well. In fact, this is just the day after the show, so I got a lot to do. I still have to do my post-show inventory and put everything away. Right now, my warehouse is a disaster. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for indulging me as I talk a little bit about this event. And if you're not already a subscriber to the channel, I would love to have you around for a future video. So hit subscribe below, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you all next time.